drain channels, so you get it's less of a waterfall of wine and more of almost like a soda fountain or something. You can stick your head under there and drink.
It'd be sticky, but
It'd be good though.
our new press is making us a lot faster. Well, new to us. We went from a 1985 press to like a 2000s. We moved up by a couple decades.
Several model numbers.
Yeah.
And you can put how many tons in that press?
6 tons versus 2.5 in the last press. So
Yeah.
it's a
The
big
crew
increase.
seemed really happy with it. That was really cool to see. Getting better equipment is always fun. And we had a little bit of a break in the weather, which is nice. We got a little bit of sunshine. Now the smoke is back again.
Okay. Looks like we're good.
Everybody's
to go.
really happy. Oh my gosh, we can start?
Yep.
Kai, are you saying we should start? Kaya is saying we should start. Live from Garden City, this is Joe Schnurr here at Cinder Winery, and I am joined, it's my honor to be joined by my wife, our wonderful winemaker, Melanie Krause. Melanie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun today. We are going to taste the 2018 Valentina. So I want to say hi to everybody out there. And as is standard with our red wines, especially the newer vintages, we're going to want to decant this, right?
Yeah, we already have.
All right, so
If you folks can decant it, please do. You don't have to have such a fancy decanter, but we like to decant them for the first year or so after we release them, just to make them open up a little bit before we start to drink them. If you can think to do it an hour or so ahead of time, that's great.
yeah, so this is going to be fun. Get that open, get it decanted, get comfortable. We're going to talk about the wine. We're going to talk about how Melanie approaches this style, why she makes it the way she does, some of the things that she enjoys pairing it with. We're also going to be happy to take any of your questions as well. So let's get into it a little bit. 2018, it's called the Valentina, but historically, Melanie, you were making this wine for many, many years before we started to call it Valentina. What was your first vintage?
Well, we made it for the first time in 2007, so that was our second year of production for Cinder. And back then it was just Cabernet and Merlot, and then through the years we were able to add Malbec. That's a variety that's pretty new here for Snake River Valley, and I'm extremely excited about that variety here.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it was such a mouthful
Oh yeah.
making people say Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot Malbec blend. You know, people would just say, I'll take that blend of yours, please. So we decided to give it a name that'd be a little bit easier to say. We chose our daughter's middle name, that's Valentina. And so here we have the evolution of the wine. You can see in our old label.
Oh, you have the 2013 there. So 2013 vintage, and then you also have out the 2014 vintage, and we are trying currently the 2018. There you can see the bottle's redesigned, and it's called Valentina. Very interesting. Well, let's taste it. Let's smell, taste, observe, as we've been taught, right?
Sure.
I, of course, learned this when I was an altar boy. But first we're going to observe the color, and a lot of nice red in there, and a little bit of darkness. Not as inky as, say, our Syrah. And then I'm going to go in, and what fruit are we going to get, Mel? Red fruit, black fruit?
Yeah, I think the Bordeaux varieties like these, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Merlot, even the Malbec, they express a lot of bright, fresh red fruits. Like think about cranberries or fresh raspberries, plus some spiciness too, like a little bit of allspice almost in there on the nose. Some of that's going to be coming from the barrels.
Okay.
And then really bright, almost tart finish, lots of kind of sprightly tannins and acidity on the finish on this wine. It's a lively wine.
There's not a lot of cooked fruit in this one to me. This is more fresh, red fruit, cranberries, cherry. For me, cherry seems to be kind of like a classic descriptor of Cabernet Sauvignon. And you've got quite a bit of Cabernet Sauvignon in this. What is the exact blend on this vintage? I know that let's go to it's okay to read off the bottle. Oh,
Okay.
it's on the back now.
It's 46% Cabernet Sauvignon, 37% Merlot, and 17% Malbec.
Okay. Yummy, tasty. I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Shoot us any sort of info. I always love to hear from folks what flavors they're experiencing, aromas they're experiencing, or pairings. So that's always fun to get input from the viewers. You wanted to say something. I can tell. You did one of these little motions. Go ahead. This little.
Hey, can I get in there?
Yep, get in there.
So, lots of times people ask me, how exactly do you come up with the percentages? Our percentages do change a little bit year to year. And, I mean, the sort of most basic answer is it's mostly up to Mother Nature. We have about the same amount of Merlot as Cabernet contracted out there with our growers.
Okay.
But on any given year, it's going to vary slightly. Sometimes Merlot will have more, sometimes Cabernet. Lots of different weather conditions.
Mother Nature is not a factory. She is going to be a little bit more this way one year, a little bit more the next year.
Yeah, so that's kind of the big thing. But we do, of course, do some blending as well. We keep Malbec a little bit on the down low in this blend. We've never really gone too much over 15%. And that's intentional. I want this to showcase Merlot and Cabernet. The Malbec is very forceful. If any of you guys have tried our new Malbec, it could overpower the other two, I think. So we like to keep it sort of at the 10 to 15% range. And that's something where we very deliberately decide, exactly how much Malbec do we want in the Bordeaux blend. But our Cabernet Merlot, back and forth percentage, that's mostly Mother Nature that decides that.
It's nice. It has, I've noticed over the years, there is a varying in the percentages, but it always seems to present itself as this red fruit forward, nicely balanced wine, good acidity, a nice bite at the end. One of our bigger red wines, you recommend aging this 10, 15, 20 years, absolutely. We've tried wines, our Valentina, our Bordeaux blend, as it was called prior, 12, 13 years later, wonderful wine, really showing well, flavors integrated nicely. So definitely something that we would recommend. Again, when it's young, decant it, and then try to hide it from yourself or your spouse in that cellar in your house. And 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, you're going to be so happy that you hid some, because it's really going to have evolved into an even more beautiful experience. So good luck hiding it from your spouse. But let's talk about this blend. Let's talk about the varieties, and this is often a common question, and that is, what do each of these varieties bring to the wine, and why are you bringing these three together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. These are a really traditional blend. That's why we refer to it as the Bordeaux blend, is because these 5 varieties are there are 5 varieties allowed in Bordeaux, 5 reds. There are these 3 plus Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. And because of that, people just refer to combinations of these varieties as Bordeaux blends. The reason they've been making them and combining them for so long is, because the French are smart and they realize that these go well together. And so, here at Cinder, sometimes we don't have any rules that apply to us really like the European regions do. Sometimes we like to break the rules or the traditions, and sometimes we stick with them. And this is one where we're sticking with tradition because it does make delicious wine.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, you're definitely honoring tradition here. I've seen how well these blend together. I've been fortunate enough to work closely with Melanie and be allowed down into the cellar, sneak back there, taste the barrels.
Sometimes, not very often. But
yeah, I mean, you keep me out of there most of the time now. But it's really been interesting. The sum is greater than the parts here. I've tasted the barrels of Cabernet Sauvignon, of Merlot, of Malbec. And gosh, when they come together, they really become something fantastic and sort of at another level than just the components by themselves. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I've heard you describe these 3 varieties, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Merlot, and the Malbec, as different parts of a human body and how they come together to make somebody. Can you describe that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So what I find with these three wines is they have a lot of similarities of flavor, but they have fairly different textures. And the moment when you feel the texture in your mouth seems to hit at a different time. So when you blend them together, what you get is a smoother, more whole experience. So the way this works, if we break it down, is Cabernet Sauvignon tends to be a really, it's like a pair of shoulders. It's a wine that has a lot of fortitude, especially at the finish. So
how much do you bench? Like that?
Like that,
Like
yeah.
the big shoulders?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just imagine.
So I think about Cabernet in this blend as being sort of like the skeleton or the big shoulders of the wine, because when you have it in your mouth, that's what we winemakers call the mid palate. It can be a little bit less rich, and then but after you swallow, that's what we call the finish. Then all the sensation hits you. So the tannins come out. So it's very much like a big hitter on the finish Cabernet.
Okay, so the finish, the structure, the bones, that outline is the Cabernet Sauvignon. Mm-hmm. What is the Merlot doing? Is it the eyeballs? Is it the nose? Is it the nostril? What is it? What part of the body? We have the skeleton.
So Merlot's like the muscle, the flesh of the wine. So
Okay.
when it's in your mouth in the mid palate, it's quite heavyweight, very silky, textural, tastes great. It has this weight to it in your mouth. And then on the finish, it's also a pretty good finishing wine, heavy, but a little bit softer, a little gentler than the Cabernet. So if Cabernet, you're going along like this, and then, the finish is really big. Merlot starts earlier on the curve and finishes a little sooner. You put the two of them together, and you've just got a bigger, longer, heavier sensation of the wine.
You're getting more of a seamless expression on the wines than it being an abrupt end or abrupt beginning.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, we're talking about wine, we're talking about taste, we're talking about flavor, and we're using our hands. What's up with that? And I find it to be kind of hilarious. Now, okay, so we have structure, we have body. What's the Malbec adding? We have a person now, they have muscle, and they have flesh on them, they have a skeletal system. But we have Malbec. What's Malbec adding?
Well, I think of Malbec, especially at this percentage, as sort of like the cologne on the wine. So Malbec is very expressive aromatically, and it helps to lift the wine up, to just enrichen and sort of make the wine easier to smell. So it's just like that little spritz of perfume or cologne at the end.
Yeah, it's like we're playing charades, isn't it, with our hands? It's
Yeah.
2 words. First word,
Yeah.
drink.
So, I mean, Malbec has very big textures, so it makes a great standalone wine. But in this blend, it serves as that aromatic component.
Very interesting. So I have to bring this up because it cracks me up, is in the past we have talked about how different wines could maybe even be different movie stars or models. Just trying to anthropomorphize the experience and get us to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think the Bordeaux blend, the Valentina, this blend is compared to, say, another one of our red wines. Because I've heard you do this before. I think it's pretty funny.
Well, it's clean, it's tight, it's muscular, it's kind of like a male underwear model.
All right. Interesting. So if I drink it, then I'll start to look like a male underwear model.
That's the idea, yeah.
Good enough. Or for the ladies, if they want to spend a night with a male underwear model, they can buy a bottle.
It's a very good companion, especially beside the fireplace,
Perfect. Where it would be warmer for him because he's cold, because he only has
Yeah.
underwear on.
Yeah.
Poor guy. What about the Syrah? It's my favorite.
Well, Syrah's voluptuous, silky, kind of smoky, seductive. I mean, I don't know, Catherine Zeta-Jones maybe.
My type of wine. I dig it. Okay, so I understand that, and it's interesting how the wines come together. And this is more the Bordeaux blend, the Valentina, is about tradition. It's about respecting how these wines come together and how the French have sort of noticed that centuries ago and have been doing that. Now but we're in the U.S. We're making this wine. We're in the Snake River Valley. Prior to this, you were in Washington State, and actually the Merlot in Washington is something that you have always talked about in a very high regard. So tell me a little bit about what you enjoyed about working with Merlot in Washington, and what's the transition been like coming to the Snake River Valley?
Well, Merlot was my favorite red grape to work with in Washington. I was a huge fan. They make incredibly rich textural Merlots. It was very difficult in the cellar when I worked in Washington to differentiate Merlot and Cab because the Merlot there was so big. Now, when I moved to the Snake River Valley, I started to focus more on Syrah and Tempranillo because those two seem to me to have bigger strengths than the Merlot here.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that will be that way forever. We'll see. There's been lots of renewal of vineyards in the last 10 years. Some of the older first generation vineyards are coming out, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's kind of sad in a sense. They represent a lot of history, but new plantings are going into better sites with better clones, better cleaner rootstock and stuff. So there's been a lot of improvement.
So you've been working with Merlot in the Snake River Valley since '07, but you're seeing improvement in the fruit, and you're getting kind of even more excited about what the potential is for the wine.
Yeah, so I definitely think that our Idaho Merlot has done a lot of improving in the last decade, and we have more to go in that, like more potential there. So
something to look forward to. Now, Malbec. Talk about the Malbec, because we're high elevation desert. What's it like here?
Oh, well, Malbec is so vigorous. It loves to grow in a desert because it needs to be reined in. It's a vine that will just take off and grow massive amounts of canopy and not that much fruit if it's given all the water it wants and really cozy conditions to grow in. So what it needs is less water, harsher conditions, and then it puts more into those reproductive organs, the grape, and kind of tames the canopy and stuff. So you need to stress Malbec out a little bit to have it really shine. And because we do all drip irrigation here, we're in a high elevation desert, we're able to kind of keep Malbec tamed.
A little bit like we deal with our Tempranillo.
Yeah, Tempranillo is another one. Super vigorous, and it's really helpful to grow it in a desert where you can really dole out every drop of water. That's one of the important roles that my growers play is in controlling how much water a vine gets. And then that changes so much about the vine's performance.
Thinking about this wine, how it ages, how it comes together, the different components, what is the most challenging thing that you find when you're blending a wine together, when you're trying to match up those notes and make that entire experience kind of one arc?
I'm sorry, I'm so distracted by all of the submissions that Kaya's been submitting here about Syrah, Smooth, George Clooney, and then there was a Marilyn Monroe entry, and I'm not sure whether that was for Syrah or the Valentina, but I would say Marilyn Monroe is more of a Valentina myself, but I don't know. So I lost that whole last sentence because the movie star submissions are cracking me up in the background.
They're pretty funny. I did like the George Clooney, Syrah, George Clooney. It could be like the male Syrah version. Guy's great.
Yeah.
Love him. Let's send him a bottle.
Super smooth and sexy.
Yeah, let's send him a bottle for sure. I was...
Okay, you were saying?
Well, you're blending these...
I'll try to concentrate.
That's okay. It's just your job today.
Yeah.
You're blending Bordeaux variety. You're blending the Valentina together. You and Haley, your assistant winemaker, are working together. Is it always very simple? You're tasting it and you say to yourself, oh yeah, this is the cab and it's going to be about this variety. Do you have to pull back a certain amount sometimes and say, actually more Cabernet Sauvignon would be too much on this blend? You've told us that they're roughly 50-50, your production of Cabernet Sauvignon and your production of Merlot every year, and that Mother Nature affects percentages. Is that it, or do you also say, I actually want less Cab in this year because it'll create a better wine if I do that?
Well, then you have the question of what do you do with the Cabernet that you just pulled out?
Drink it. Drink it at home.
So a little bit of that happens, but especially that happens in the sense that sometimes we'll pull a reserve out if there's a lot that's just we feel is exceptionally wonderful that year and we want to highlight it. We have only a couple times we've pulled a reserve Cabernet Sauvignon out. That was a few years ago, and then a few years before that a reserve Merlot. So sometimes we do a little bit of that, and then occasionally we may need to use some of our Bordeaux blends to balance another variety. So
Okay.
the task that we have as winemakers when we're looking at blending is to optimize the whole portfolio, not just the Valentina, but also the Syrah, the Tempranillo, the Laissez-Faire Red. And so we'll look at all the wines together and say, well, we maybe need a little bit more fruit in the Tempranillo, so we're going to go to the Bordeaux's to find that fruit, and we might take 10% of one of the Bordeaux's over into the Tempranillo. And so we have to look at how the whole picture balances out, and so that will guide a lot of our blending decisions.
I got it. That makes sense. I'm seeing copious suggestions on the movie and the movie stars now that are cracking me up as well. Someone has actually gone into Jessica Rabbit being a version of Syrah. So we're into the over-sexualized cartoons now. So we are in big trouble. We better wrap this up before we offend everyone out there. But it seems like people get the whole idea of a wine having a personality.
Yeah.
And having a personality that we kind of all can discuss if it's a super handsome guy or it's a bombshell woman, whatever it is, it does kind of is something we can all talk about,
Yeah.
which is fun.
Yeah.
So, Mel, before we're finished, let's talk about food with this wine.
Okay.
This wine to me is screaming for some meat. What do you think?
Yes, I mean it's going to go really well with all those traditional pairings that you think of, like steak and stuff. It's so fruit forward that I think that you can pair it with a lot of stuff other than just a steak. I definitely try it with pork, especially pork cooked with fruit.
Oh, good.
Of course,
The prime rib.
we usually recommend Syrah with game because Syrah has such a sort of deep, rich gaminess, but this would go with game.
I've got to say prime rib
Oh yeah.
for
Definitely.
sure. Do
For
it.
sure.
You're not going to be. Take this one. It's never a bad idea to go to the steakhouse with something like this. But again, also give it an opportunity to age. You're going to be super happy. You could go. Time for one more question before we wrap up today. And it's a big question because
Yeah.
it's,
Somebody gave me a really hard one here.
Yeah,
It says, Mel, why are Idaho Bordeaux blends so different from California cabs?
well, we're
okay,
comparing
well,
apples to oranges here a little bit in the sense
Yeah.
Bordeaux blend is going to be different than Cabs.
yeah, I mean,
Cabernet
so,
Sauvignons,
okay,
but-
so we're probably mostly talking about like Napa Cabernets just to narrow it down a little bit. So we have tremendously different, what's it
Growing
called?
season.
Growing seasons, yeah, climates to begin with. This is how the heat accumulates in Idaho. It waits a long time to start, and then it goes up really steep, gets super hot, and then it comes way back down again as soon as September hits. So we have this extremely straight up and down accumulation of heat. And then this is what Napa's like. It starts way over here in February and starts accumulating. It doesn't go nearly as high as Idaho, and then it gradually eases off way later in the year. So much longer, less abrupt, and that is going to create a lot of differences between how we grow things and how they grow things. I mean, that's like hands down the biggest difference. What effect that has on our exact wines, I would say Napa Cabs are totally famous. They're really rich. Ours, I think, are equally aromatic, maybe not quite as rich, and it probably has to do with just not having that really, really long amount of time to accumulate. Cabernet is a late ripener, so it tends to favor climates that are really long growing seasons. And ours is a little bit shorter. So, but then Merlot's an early ripener and seems to like that heat. So I think that's why Merlot's maybe performs, I would say, a little bit better in Idaho and in Washington, is because we've got a shorter, more intense climate.
It's almost, Merlot's almost outperforming Cabernet Sauvignon in the Northwest.
Yeah, that's my personal preference anyway.
Which means she's right. She's almost always right. I've learned. That is a really, and also stylistically, I know they asked about Idaho Cabernet Sauvignons, but we can talk specifically about Cinder. Your style is going to be a lot different. You're working with different fruit than they are in Napa. You're gonna be different. You're gonna take a different approach with your oak, and also when you want these wines consumed, right? Compared to, say, a Napa wine.
Yeah, I mean, I think just my personal house style is that I like my wines to be beautifully aromatic and very smooth in the way that they evolve on your mouth. So not necessarily that they're so smooth they're wimpy, but also I don't want you to have to eat my wines with a steak. I don't want you to have to use a steak knife on the wine. You know, they're not so chewy and bold that you can't just enjoy them as a glass on their own. So I would say that there's definitely an influence of my house style on this that's probably different from maybe the goal of a Napa Valley winery that's competing with a whole bunch of Cabernets over $100.
And those are big, and you love those.
It's a little more approachable, I would say.
And those ones I want to buy, and I want to sit on them for 5 or 10 years before I even go back to them.
Yeah,
because they're pretty big. So that's often a difference that we find.
Yeah, we're comparing like a universe with a universe. It's kind of hard to do, but.
Yep. Okay, so we are going to wrap it up. We're going to thank everybody, but before we go, we are going to tell you a couple of things. One is that next week is the Gewürztraminer. It's part of the virtual tasting. It's also our staff pick. So check that out because there's additional discounts on purchases of 6 bottles or more. And then we're also going to give you your secret promo code that's only going to be good for 1 week starting now. And this is for online orders only of 6 bottles or more of anything. And if you put in the secret code on your online order, surprise, we are going to go ahead and throw in a random piece of Cinder apparel. It's winter style. Here we're showing one of our wonderful hoodies that's available, but we have several other things. Put in that surprise discount code. Okay, put that surprise in on the order notes, by the way. Put that in the order notes online, and if you have trouble, you can always give us a call direct. Our phone number's on the website. We've got wonderful wine club liaisons ready to help you. I want to thank everybody for your support. I hope everybody's staying safe. Don't forget, wash your hands, call your mother, eat your vitamins.
Thanks, guys.